What's Azure OpenAI and why should you care about it? It's a fully managed service that allows us to easily integrate OpenAI models into our applications. Because with the Azure OpenAI service, we have a direct access to a wide range of AI models. We have access to the chat and completion APIs and the latest DALL-E text-to-image model. And Microsoft created a whole learning path for this. You can check it out here. I think this is great as it's pretty comprehensive and it's well structured because you can really get up and running pretty fast. But let's speed up this learning by creating our own service and let's see how we can explore it. First, you need to request access to the Azure OpenAI service. You can do that in your Azure account when you select the OpenAI service. Once you submit your application, it will take a couple of days. Now that you got approved, let's get started and create an instance. First, you need to create a new resource group. And I think this is important because with resource groups, you can manage costs better. You have cost analysis available, so it's easy to monitor spending. Now, select the region, and I'm going to go here with the default region because OpenAI is not available everywhere. You gotta pick a name for your instance, and this has to be unique. And then you only have the standard pricing tier, so let's select that. Click next, and in the network you have 3 available options. All networks is the default, literally no security, and it makes it the easiest way to get started. This is not the best option, and I suggest that you go with either the selected networks or with disabled, and then you can create a private endpoint. I'm going to choose selected networks, and you can see now that we're going to also create a virtual network and a subnet that will allow access to this instance. We're going to look into what this means in a second, so let's move on. Click next, and here we don't need to add any tags because we're going to just monitor costs by resource group. And now we can go ahead and create the Azure OpenAI instance and the virtual network. Now we can access OpenAI and click on Explore to go to the Azure OpenAI Studio. Here's where we can create deployments and use the playground to run our queries. The first thing that we need to do is create a deployment. And a deployment is just an OpenAI model that we'll use. And here we have multiple options. And I'm going to choose the GPT 3.5 Turbo model, and the model version will be the latest. Give it a name and create. From the chat playground, we can select how the chat should act. This is a system message that just creates a persona for the AI model. And I'm going to choose a Shakespeare assistant and replace the default one. Now I'm going to ask it to say something Shakespearean, and as you can see, we're denied access as we have virtual network rules in place. And we also didn't configure it to accept requests from our IP range. And this is exactly what we want because we don't want to allow all access to this important resource. Now, there are multiple ways in which we can give it access depending on what we want to do. For example, if you just want to use the playground here, you can simply do this. We can go to the networking tab in our instance and add our client IP address to allow access from this specific address. And you can add as many as you want, but still this will be an open access over the internet. Remember that every time you make a change in networking, it will take up to 3 minutes for the setting to change. So be patient because it will work. So now you can see that as we added the IP, we get our response. But in a production application, you might need to run this from a VM. So you're going to do a little bit more. You're going to need to create a VM in this virtual network and then create a private endpoint so you can access Azure OpenAI from that private environment. And here I created a VM and I connected to it through the Azure CLI. I installed pip and I also installed the OpenAI Python package. Now in our chat playground, we'll just copy the sample code for this so we can just run it from a script from our VM. We're also going to add our OpenAI key to the script.py file, and if we're trying to run this script, we're going to get this permission error. As we have a virtual network configured and we don't have the correct endpoint, we won't be able to make any requests. Again, this is perfect, right? We know that this is secure. In order to have the best security in place for this, now we need to create a private endpoint so that we can access the resource. Now let's go to our instance, to the networking tab, and click on private endpoint connections. Here we can create an endpoint. You give it a name. Also in the virtual network tab, make sure that you select the subnet that was created earlier, and then everything else will be the default. Create this endpoint, and now you can see that this is part of the virtual network and subnet. Now if you run the script again, you're going to have access and you're going to get the response as it goes through this private endpoint and your connection is fully secure. So when it comes to keeping your private data secure, these are the best options for Azure OpenAI security. First, always make sure that you only allow access from selected networks and private endpoints. Then, if you just want to test things out in the playground in the UI, then just add your IP in the firewall section to allow access. It automatically gets your IP and then you can just check the box and save. On the other hand, if you want to run a script from a VM, create that VM in a virtual network and create a private endpoint. Now you have a fully managed and secure OpenAI service that you can use with your private data. Play around with these models, and once you have a use case in mind, reach out to us, because this is what we do at DecisionForest. We can transform your business with AI-powered solutions in a fully secure manner, and we make sure that we get you from zero to value in no time. I really hope that this was helpful, and as always, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more content like this. I'll see you in the next one.